There you have the soothing sounds of 155 tuning in the key of D. That's DAA, and in November 2019, we're going to dig down deep into this tuning and some very, very fundamental things for all of you novice and for you beginner mountain dulcimer players. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dulcimerica. My name is Futch. Thank you for joining me. So I'm going to start things off here. We're in the key of D, and we're playing in DAA tuning. It's a 155 tuning, and what do those numbers mean? Those are scale degrees, and they refer to notes of the scale. So D is the first note of the scale, and A is the fifth note of the scale, so 155. The reason I make that point is because we have DAA tuning, but that's basically just a step up from CGG tuning, and that is the traditional mountain dulcimer tuning. It's also a 155. C is the first note of the C major scale, and G is the fifth note of the C major scale. So what we're doing is we're taking the first note and putting it on the bass string of whatever scale, whatever key we want to be in. And the next two strings we're going to tune to the fifth note of the scale. That means that all of the things you're going to learn this month as pertaining to the 155 tuning can be used for a lot of different keys. So you can learn just one song with those chord shapes and then retune your dulcimer in any configuration, any of the many different ways of tuning into this 155, and then you'll be able to play the song in many different keys. So it's a good skill to have, and we'll brush up on some fundamentals, but mainly, more importantly, we'll get to know DAA, and we will start off by learning how to read tablature. So if you're way beyond this, you might want to skip and go on to another episode down the road, but if you're a novice or a beginning player, or just need a refresher, this would be a good place to start. So once again, we are in DAA tuning. That's the bass string tuned to D, middle string tuned to A, and melody string tuned to A as well. If you have a tuner, then you can just pluck the string and the tuner will let you know what that note is and how far you have to go, either up or down, to get that into tune. If you don't have a tuner, you can actually tune the dulcimer to itself, and it only matters if you are trying to tune with me. But if you want to tune with me, here's my D. I gave you a D and an A. Here's my D again by itself. Start off by matching your bass string with my bass string. And then when you get that set, I'll give you one more. Then go ahead and take a finger and place it on the 4th fret, to the left of the 4th fret, and that's A. Go ahead and pluck that note, and then tune your middle string to match. When you've got that set, then you've got an A string on the melody, and you can tune that to the middle string. Now, you hear that shiny kind of a sound? Watch what happens when I start to twist the tuner here on the melody string. Did you hear that shininess sort of go away? Now I'm going to bring the shininess back in. Listen for the beat. Listen for the fluctuation in the waveform. It'll sound like a wave, wah, 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 like this. Can you hear that? It sounds kind of shiny, yeah? The further out of tune I take that melody string, the further I take it away from being in tune, those beats are going to get faster and faster until it's really obvious that you're not quite in tune. Now, as I pull the melody string closer back into pitch with the middle string, you'll hear those beats, those waves start to slow down. Now hear how both strings sound like exactly the same string. There's no shininess, there are no beats, there's no thing going on in the middle of that. That means that they are greatly, nicely in tune. What you're hearing is the sound of the frequencies. Every single note that we play on any instrument has its own very specific frequency in the sound spectrum. And what we have here are two notes that are exactly the same note. So if we get them tuned perfectly, they will sound like one note. But the more I take one of those notes and make it go flat, which means I'm taking the pitch downwards, or making it go sharp, which means I'm taking the pitch upwards, that means that note is slowly becoming another note, different than the one next to it. And the more it changes, the more you're going to hear that fluctuating in the frequency, because now those frequencies, which have the exact same pattern, the same vibration going through the air, that vibration pattern for each of the notes is now slowly changing as we change the tuning of one of the strings. And that becomes more and more obvious as we get further and further away from the string that we're not touching, the string that is staying the same. That might be a lot to consider right off the bat if you're a novice or beginner player, but it's a good thing to know that when you're trying to tune two strings that are exactly the same pitch, they should sound exactly the same. And if they're a little bit out of tune, you'll get those beats, you'll get that sound that will alarm you to the fact that you're not quite in tune. It's just a very, very easy way to tune if you don't actually have a tuner. Now, having said that, I'm actually going to detune my melody string just a little bit, because I've got a gauge on there that's happy with DAD tuning, but not very happy with DAA tuning, because I'm dropping it down quite a bit on the melody string. So what I'm doing is, if I push down with the same force I use across the other two strings, that string, now being quite slack, will actually go sharp as I use the same sort of pressure on the fretboard. So by detuning the string, making it go a little flatter than it should be, when I press down upon it, instead of it going sharp, a little sharper or higher than it should be, it'll actually land in just about the right place for this. All of which is a way of me saying I'm too lazy to change out this melody string for this episode. So that's what I'm doing here and now. I should get a nice clean sound across the board. Okay, so DAA tuning, we are set, and we're going to remain there, like I said, for the entire month of November. So if you don't have any experience playing DAA, hopefully you'll get a lot out of the later episodes. But the first part of our study here is going to be looking at how to read tablature, and also how to interpret that and play up and down the fretboard. So I want to get deep into this a bit. Before I do that, I want to say hello to one of my patrons, Roby Laird. Roby, thank you very much for being a patron and for helping to make this episode of Dulcimerica possible. I thank all my patrons every single day for being a part of my art, and they've joined up on Patreon for $5 a month or more, and that gives you exclusive access to everything that I produce. It includes all of my CDs, books, tablature, and video, plus everything I do every single week. If you want to sample it, go ahead and come on down here to this URL. It's patreon.com/BingFutch. I'm also going to flash you a URL that will give you some of the tablature and exercises for this episode. It's a great opportunity for you to explore the site, find out what's available, and if you like what you see in here, please do consider becoming a patron like Roby. Roby, thank you very much. And all of my patrons, you are my heart and soul. Thank you, guys. All right, so we're going to jump into this, first of all, by taking a look at a piece of tablature that I'm going to put here up on the screen. What you're seeing is basically a blank fretboard, first of all. And the fretboard is showing you what the fretboard looks like, first of all. And you can see from the very, very far left side, that would be the nut of the instrument. The nut is going to be right here on your mountain dulcimer. And I also have an additional fret here. That's the 1.5 fret. If I cover that up, you can see that my fret pattern looks exactly the same as the fret pattern that you see on the screen. Wide space, and narrow space, and that's the first 3 frets, 1, 2, and 3. If you do have a 1.5 fret, that's exactly what you're looking at. There is 1.5 in between frets 1 and 2. We continue that all the way up until you get to another little group of small frets, and that's going to be 6, 6.5, and 7. Most people do have the 6.5 fret. That's considered fairly standard these days in the mountain dulcimer world. But some of you out there still do have purely diatonic dulcimers, meaning there are no additional half steps, and you might not have the 6.5 fret. It's easy to have that installed, or maybe better to just leave that one around for old time's sake and get another dulcimer with a 6.5 fret. Okay, so that is what the fretboard looks like, and we can count those frets. We're going all the way up to the 7th fret, which is the octave, meaning it's the exact same notes you'll find when we strum open, when we play at the 7th fret. Only they're an octave higher in pitch. All right, now I'll get some tablature up on the screen, and I want you to first of all to notice that at the top of the tablature we've got basic music, standard music notation. If you don't read standard music notation, don't worry about it. You don't have to learn how to read music to play the mountain dulcimer or to read tablature. But if you do read music, it's helpful to have it there so that you can see very quickly what it is that you're playing. Now, getting yourself used to reading the numbers, that might take a little bit of time. So what we're going to do now is take a look at that tablature at the bottom underneath the standard music notation, and you can see that it looks exactly like the fretboard. In fact, if you look at the top line of the tablature, that is your bass string. Look at the middle line on your tablature, and that is your middle string. Look at the bottom line on your fretboard tablature there, and there you'll see that is your melody string. That's where the numbers are located right now, and that is where we're going to be focusing all of our attention, just playing on the melody string. So take a look at the major scale. When we're tuned in DAA or simply 1-5-5 tuning, the scale is going to begin from the 3rd fret, which is the first narrow fret you have, unless you have the 1.5 fret. And then we're going to go all the way up to the 10th fret. And the 10th fret is going to be a small fret, and you probably will not have the 8.5, another half step fret right there. So you'll see that moving from 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, and we would skip over the 8.5. If you've got the 8.5, 1.5, you'll get used to counting those half steps as we approach them here. So this scale is going to go from the 3rd fret to the 10th fret, and is not going to use any extra steps. So it's not going to use the 6.5, it's not going to use the 8.5. And when we're playing this in the key of D, DAA, we're going to be playing from the 3rd fret, and that's going to give us our D major scale, right from the 3rd fret moving up to the 10th fret, like this. Calling out the fret numbers as I go, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's our D major scale in DAA tuning. The scale itself with the notes is D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. So let's go ahead and play the D major scale from the 3rd fret to the 10th fret, and then we'll repeat that top note and come back down again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat the top note. Okay, so there we've got our D major scale, and we are ready to start playing. We've got our 3 strings, we have our tablature, we know what to look for. Basically, tablature is a way of playing by the numbers. It's like painting by numbers in a way. You don't have to know the note, but you do have to be able to count up the fretboard and know where all of your frets are located. A good way of doing this is not to worry about trying to count every individual fret, But to find some frets that are landmarks, know what those numbers are and then count upwards or downwards from there. For example, that third fret is a landmark fret because it's the first small fret you'll encounter unless you have a 1.5 fret. When you go from open, which means no fingers touching the instrument, on up. The third fret is the first small fret. It's the lowest small fret if you don't have the 1.5 fret. Down here, close to the nut and close to the head of the instrument. So if you just remember that that's 3, instead of having to count all the way up from open to 1 to 2 to 3, you can look down at that small fret, start from there and just go 3, 4, 5 and work your way up. Another landmark fret is the 6th fret. After the 3rd fret, it is the next up for being a narrow fret. One of the small frets and the first of the 3 that you find here. You could consider this whole area here kind of a landmark. 6, 6.5, and 7. 6 is the next skinny fret you'll get after 3. 3, 6, 3, and 6. The top of this group of 3 skinny frets is 7. That's the octave. That's where our scale, that's where our octave ends, and then the next octave begins. The 7th fret is a great landmark fret to know as well. Easy to know then that in between the 6th fret and the 7th fret is 6.5. Those 3 will probably leap into your head a lot sooner than the 3 will. Even so, when you start looking at these numbers, it's easier then, instead of counting all the way from the bottom, to either start from 3 and walk up to 4 and 5, or start from 6 and walk down to 5, 4, or from 6 and go upwards, 6.5, 7, 8, and so forth. So that's the basic way you're going to be reading the tablature, is just playing, putting your finger down on the fret area, and that's just to the left of whatever fret is mentioned in the tablature. So if it says 3rd fret, you'll go to the 3rd fret and then go just to the left of it and press your finger down there. And then a nice solid touch as well. Not too light, because you might not get a good clear sound. You might get some buzzing in there, or may not get a sound at all. Press down just hard enough so that note rings out for a good long time. Press down too hard and you'll go sharp, and that will give you some sour sounds down the road. So a nice light touch, but just enough pressure to get a nice clean tone. Whenever you see that number on that bottom line, that means we're playing those numbers, those frets, on the melody string. If you see those numbers on the middle string or middle line, that means that those notes are going to be played on the middle string. And if the numbers appear on the top line of the tablature, that means you're going to be playing those numbers, those frets, those notes on the bass string. So play them just as you see them as you're looking down at your mountain dulcimer. All right. So before we go any further with reading notes and tablature, let's take a brief moment to look at some of the fundamental rhythms that we're going to run into. So we'll start off with the quarter note. And let's assume that we are in 4/4 time, or common time, as it's also known. This involves a bit of math, and don't worry, I am terrible at math, but it's fun math when you make it come together with music. We're in 4/4 time. The top number 4 is how many beats are in the measure, and the bottom 4 is what note will actually receive the beat, or what are we looking for as a reference. And that 4 stands for quarter note. So if we have 4 quarter notes, each one of those quarter notes inside of a measure is going to get 1 beat, for a total of 4 beats in the measure. So if we play just one whole note, that's a big round note that's clear with no stem on it. If there is just one big whole note in a measure of 4/4, that means we're going to strum one time or pick one time, and that note's going to last for 4 beats like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's a whole note. Now we can take that whole note, slice it in half, do musical surgery, and split that whole note in half to two parts. Now we've got two half notes. The half notes are clear like the whole note, but they've got these little stems hanging off of them. So that kind of shows that they've been divided. And that now means, whereas the whole note got one big, huge count of 4, each of these half notes will get 2 counts, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice I didn't go 1, 2, 1, 2. I want to make sure that I'm still saying all 4 numbers of the count, 1, 2, 3, 4, so I know where I am inside the measure. And this is really going to be helpful as we get into some more subdivisions down the way. So once again, 2 half notes is 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't you know we can take each one of those half notes and cut them in half? And since a half note has 2 beats, when we cut that half note in half, we now have 2 quarter notes in its place, each one of them getting 1 beat. So if we cut each of our 2 half notes in half, we end up with 4 quarter notes, and they are black notes, and they each have stems on them. And if we play them in a measure, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. We continue our tour through the chopping and the slicing with the 8th note. Take each of those quarter notes and cut them in half, and we end up with 2 8th notes. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because we only have a 1, 2, 3, 4 count. But if we split every one of the quarter notes, we now have 8 8th notes. Do we count to 8 now? No, actually what we do is we add the word and we put that. So visualize, and I will help you by having this up on the screen, that we've got 4 quarter notes. We've split each one of those quarter notes in half. What we have now are 2 pairs of notes, 2 8th notes for every quarter note. The first of each of those pairs still gets the number. It still gets 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. That second in the pair gets the and, so we know what number it belongs to. So 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and we play that like this. 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. Now you'll notice that those 8 notes are connected by a bar. They're black and they have a stem, but they're also connected by a bar to show that they belong together and that 2 of them equal 1 quarter note. If you saw an 8th note by itself, it would have the stem, and it would also have one little flag flying off of the stem. So remember that 8 notes are bonded together by 1 bar, or by themselves they're indicated by 1 flag coming off of the stem. Now we can take each one of those 8 notes, you know what's coming, and split each one of those 8 notes in half to get 2 16th notes. That means that we can go ahead and take that 8th note pair and split each of those 8 notes in half. And now, in the place of 1 quarter note, in the place of 2 8th notes, we now have 4 16th notes. And now that we have, if we've done that for every single 8th note in our measure, we now have 16 notes in the measure. How are we going to number these? We still want to keep that grouping. The first note in a grouping of 4 16th notes gets the number. And then we still have the and that's going to be the third out of every cluster of 4 16th notes. The third note is going to be the and still. It's in the same place it was when it was an 8th note by itself. The numbers are at the same location they were when they were just simply quarter notes. But now we're adding in e and to account for the other 2. And once again, each one of these, I call them nonsense syllables, or phonetics, if you will, but each one of the 3 additional deals that we put in there are going to be referencing the number that they are associated with, so you know where you are at in the measure. So in the case of 4 16th notes, 1 E and is going to be how we read that. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and You'll notice that the 16th notes are all bonded together by bars like the 8th notes, but they're bonded together by 2 bars as opposed to just the 1 bar for the 8th note. That's so you can tell the difference if you have a measure that's got 8th notes and 16th notes all kind of clustering around together. So when you see a 16th note, a group of them, you'll have 2 bars there. If you see a 16th note by itself, you'll see the stem and 2 little flags flying off of that stem. So 16th notes like to group together in bars connected by 2 bars, or by themselves with a stem flying 2 flags. To recap, 8th notes are bonded together by 1 bar, and when they are by themselves, they have a stem with 1 flag. Believe it or not, there are 32nd notes, 64th notes, 128th notes, but you're probably not going to encounter those for a very, very long time. So we'll just save that for another time, shall we? I want to show you the relationships between quarter notes, 8th notes, and 16th notes so that you can kind of get an idea of how to approach them. And we'll come back to the whole notes and half notes and that sort of thing in a little bit. So here's a cadence made up out of quarter notes, 8th notes, and 16th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. Notice that I'm using a back and forth motion when I'm playing the 8th notes and the 16th notes. But for quarter notes, I'm only outstrumming 1, 2, 3, 4. When I get to 8th notes, I'm still outstrumming on the numbers, but I'm instrumming on the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the same thing for 16th notes, but the alternating becomes quicker. But we're not speeding up, actually. We are just playing more notes in the same amount of space, like this. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1. So there you have a cadence that you can practice, and that'll get your strumming hand used to playing quarter notes, 8th notes, and 16th notes. These are the 3 most popular rhythms that you're going to run into. You will run into quarter notes and half notes and things that are tied, and we'll get to that in some of the other episodes later this month. But primarily, these 3 are what you'll be using for melody quite a bit. The half note will also come into play quite a bit as well. Let's go ahead and play a tune. Once again, you can find the tablature for this episode using the link down below at Patreon. Download all of the pages and they will help you understand a bit more about how all of this stuff goes together. The tune we're going to play is Ba Twinkle ABC because it's all of those things. It's Ba Ba Black Sheep, it's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and it's the alphabet song. It's a very, very easy tune, and we'll go ahead and play it. I've got chords there as well, so if you've got somebody in the household who plays guitar or is a mountain dulcimer player or even a mandolin player, banjo player, they can back you up on the chords with this and you guys can play together, which is always, always fun to have family playtime. So let's go ahead and play Ba Twinkle ABC. I flashed it up on the screen here a bit, so those of you who have not downloaded the tablature or haven't gotten around to it yet or aren't near your computer can get an idea of what we'll be doing on the melody string. We're starting at the 3rd fret and we are leaping up to the 7th fret. Now let's take a look at what we've got going on here. We've got quarter notes in the first measure. In the second measure we have 2 quarter notes and then we've got a half note, which is going to get 2 beats. So whenever that clear note shows up, That's a big sign that we're going to be hanging out there for a little bit. So it's a good idea to see what kind of note it is. Is it just a half note? Is it a dotted half note? Right now, we're just dealing with simple notes. So all of the clear notes in this tablature are going to be half notes getting 2 points. In fact, there's nothing tricky here besides quarter notes and half notes. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. This is Ba Twinkle ABC, call it what you will. Here we go. I'll give us 4 counts in, and those counts are all going to be quarter notes. So this is going to be exactly the tempo at which we play the tune. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, that's basically it. That's reading tablature. You're just going to be following along with the numbers that are written there on each of the lines. We're starting off very, very simple and easy with just working on one line, one string. And as we get throughout the month, we'll be adding some other layers to that. We'll keep it nice and simple for now. Let's play an Elvis tune. Actually, it's an old folk song called R.L.E., but Elvis turned it into a tune called Love Me Tender. So you can call it whichever one you like, but it's a great party song to break out if you've just started playing your mountain dulcimer. You're like, hey man, want to hear some Elvis? People are like, what? You can play Elvis on the mountain dulcimer? Yes, you can. And yes, we are. So take a look at R.L.E. It's also in the tablature pack available through the link below on Patreon. One thing I want to point out here about R.L.E. and this tablature is that we've got a repeat section. That means we're going to play everything in this section, not just once, but twice. From the first measure there, through the fourth measure. You see those 2 dots at the very, very beginning? Those 2 dots in a very dark black bar where the measure line is, lets us know that we are at the beginning of a repeat section. So we need to look for that dark black bar and those 2 black dots somewhere else in the music, and everything in between those symbols, one at the beginning of a measure and one at the end of a measure. Everything we play inside there, we are going to repeat. That just saves page turns, it saves trees, it saves a lot of different things. So for this in R.L.E., we're playing the first 4 measures. And then we're going to go back and play those 4 measures again, and then move on with the rest of the piece. Here is R.L.E. Don't forget to repeat the first 4 measures. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, repeat. 2, 3, moving on. 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. All right. I hope you're finding great success with this. And I don't want to spend a bunch of time going over each of the tunes because I actually have one more tune that I'd like to get you guys going through, and then practice these. Feel free to watch this video over and over again, and then practice along with the tablature here before moving on to the next episode. And I think you guys will be in perfect shape to jump in with our next movement forward. So now we'll do a tune called This Old Man. And this has got some nice little mixtures in here. We've got some eighth notes that we're going to work in. So I want to get you used to thinking about using that in-out strum pattern, that alternating pick direction. And as you're strumming quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, remember to go outwards. But when you get to that point where the eighth notes come into play, go ahead and use the return trip and come in on the and, the second of that pair of eighth notes. Getting used to doing that now will help you down the road when you're playing tunes that move a lot quicker, fiddle tunes, tunes that have very, very quick, lightning quick passages. That back and forth action is going to help you quite a bit when it comes to negotiating that kind of picking. So let's give it a shot here. One way you can do this is to count through before you actually begin to play. So I would count this, and remember each of those half notes I'm going to count as 3, 4. Starting from the very first measure of This Old Man, I'm just going to give the counts on each of these notes. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you see how counting through it lets you know when things do pick up a bit. Whenever I hit the first of those 2 eighth notes, I know that I'm going to move a little bit quicker, and I'll use the and to count through. And that helps me scoot through that part of the measure and gives me a feel for how it's going to sound before I even play it. So do try to take a look at that and count through everything before you play it. It'll give you a real good clue as to how it's supposed to sound before you actually play it. Let's go ahead and play This Old Man. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there you have it. Just a little bit of a glance at how to read tablature, how to read basic units of rhythmic measure when we're reading through all the measures and the notes and all that stuff, and different combinations of quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, whole notes, how they all come together, how to read them in the tablature, how to feel through them, and also how to apply a alternating strum or picking action for those eighth notes that'll help you get a lot quicker in the future. I'll be back with more. Once again, all this month we are focusing on DAA tuning and some fundamentals on reading tablature and rhythm, and then getting down into some chords towards the end of the month. I must right now apologize for the lens flare that you can see over here. Since the latest Apple update, for whatever reason, I've been getting tons of lens flare when shooting video, and I've done everything in my power in this studio to try and get rid of that. It's not going away. It's an Apple problem. My apologies. It looks kind of cool, but I'm just making sure that it's not distracting so you guys can see everything clearly here on the overhead cam view. So once again, everybody, thank you so much. Do check out Patreon's open house and see if you might be interested in becoming a patron and becoming a part of my art, helping to produce Dulcimerica, and there's plenty of goodies in it for you as a mountain dulcimer player, or an ukulele, or a Native American flute player as well. Until next time, my friends, stay thirsty, keep playing, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining me.
I'm not sure.
Alexa, I wasn't talking to you.
Sorry. I thought I heard my name.
That's her first time ever talking on Dulcimerica, so I think it's a pretty special thing. We'll see you next time.